while we're waiting and while people are signing in and checking in and saying where they're from, I'm just going to start the recording. We'll record this webinar and it'll be available on the SEDAC webpage. Oh, I see somebody raise their hand. I will work on clicking something to see who raised their hand. Let's see. Participants. Oh, hello from sunny Mundelein Park District. Well, I'm glad it's sunny up there. Oh, sorry, the hand raised was by mistake. That's fine. But yeah, there's a feature to raise your hand. If you have a question, it gives a little pop-up on my screen. And you can also give a chat in the chat box that way. But we'll try to keep an eye on the chats that come in on the chat box. And you know, okay, a good distinction to make, I just realized a good distinction to make on the chat box. There's a checkbox for all panelists or everyone. And it's possible to chat and say hi to everyone if you wanted to do that on the check-in. Still getting the bugs worked out on how webinars work the best, so we'll try to figure that out. It's a couple minutes after 2 now. Somebody from Lombard just checking in and saying hi. Maybe right before I get started, I might just go through the check-in, and because I think it defaults to, the chat defaults to all panelists, and you can also chat to everyone. So basically, it's a way to ask a question of the panelists, and it shows up on my screen. So if you want to chat a question, feel free to do it to just the panelists. And if you wanted to do the check-in to everyone, I guess that you can check in to everyone as well. That'd be fine either way. I've got the second laptop here. I'm just double checking that everything looks okay on that. Looks good. It's 3 minutes after 2. We'll probably get started here in just a couple minutes. Looks like we have 21 viewers. That's excellent. Thank you everyone for taking time today to log in on this sunny, crisp winter day. If anybody wants to give a chat to everyone, the chat box is up in the, sometimes it's hidden or in the upper left-hand corner, and there's a little chat button. You can type a chat to either to just the panelists, which would be me, and Ann and Abby here in the office, or you can give a chat to everyone and say, hi, this is Andy from Champaign Park District, and give a little shout out. So far we've had Hank from Dundee Park District, Hollis Clark from Bourbonnais, John from Champaign County Forest Preserve, Sunny from Mundelein, and Lombard is checking in also. So thanks for giving the shout outs. It's nice to put a name to the emails that we see, or to the usernames that show up on our screen here. Let's see. Rearrange my screen here. It's almost 5 after. I'm also joined by Anthony Santarelli here in the office, and Anthony can help answer questions as they come up as well. So I have several people here. Yeah, Anthony, if you want to, you can. Yeah, sure. Check in here, and maybe we'll even get you. Here, I'll scoot over for just a second. You can say hi on the screen.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here today.
And Anthony helps with some of the site verification visits, some of the implementation outreach for projects and for incentives, like what we're going to talk about today.
Perfect.
Thanks, Anthony. All right, so let's get started. It's 5 after 2. We have 21 panelists. Thanks for, we had people checking in, testing the chat features. It seems to be working pretty well. But let's get started. My name is Andy Robinson, and I'm an engineer at the Smart Energy Design Assistance Center in Champaign. We are part of the Illinois Energy Now program, and today's webinar topic is Park District Energy Walkthroughs. So let's get started. Just a brief overview of what Illinois Energy Now is and who the partners are. So it's administered through the Illinois Department of Commerce, and it's a partnership between the Energy Resource Center at the University of Illinois Chicago and the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, MEA, And then the SEDAC group is specifically a partnership between University of Illinois and the 360 Energy Group. The 360 Energy Group is our private sector partner and helps with some of the subcontracting to our private partners. They're located in Chicago, so they also help with the lion's share of the Chicago projects. And this program involves multiple partners, and we're really trying to reach all corners of the state to give our free services and promote energy efficiency programs throughout the state. At SEDAC specifically, we have free services for outreach and training, for energy assistance and assessments, new construction design assistance and program incentives, which we'll touch on a little bit with a case study at the end, energy performance contracting for larger clients, retro commissioning projects for larger, more complicated buildings, and application assistance for the incentive programs that we'll touch on. Here we have an example of some bills from high school, some mechanical equipment on a roof, and some of the team here. And this is our Champaign office, but it includes some of the 360 folks as well. Like I said, we cover the entire state. So these dots are the 1,700 or so projects that we completed. I think we're getting near 2,000 in recent times here. And we cover throughout the entire state and spread our assistance all over and try to give varying levels of assistance to everyone that might need it, public sector clients. This flow chart shows the public sector clients that we work with through the Illinois Energy Now program. And the law that started this program was called the Energy Efficiency Portfolio Standard. Sometimes you might hear that as EAPS, but generally Illinois Energy Now encompasses all the public sector projects. Now the money comes from, on the upper left-hand side, we have ComEd and Ameren, and on the upper right-hand side, NICOR. So the money comes from everyone's bills to pay for these programs. There's an energy efficiency rider on the bills. 75% of that electric and 75% of that gas goes towards the private sector, and those are administered by ComEd and Ameren and their contractors. But the 25% for public buildings goes through the Department of Commerce and the Illinois Energy Now program, and that covers public sector governments, K-12 schools, community colleges, universities, park districts, and there's a sister program here that's the low income and the residential side for affordable housing, public housing authorities. But generally at SEDAC, we can cover all of these public sector clients and help with energy assessments and free services and incentives, energy efficiency. Touching on, since it's winter and it's cold outside, just to touch on gas savings incentives first. There are boiler programs that we will touch on throughout the program. If you're a really large building, there are some, the acronym is HINGE, the High Impact Natural Gas Efficiency Programs for really large savers of natural gas that can get up to the $3 and $4.50 per therm range for really big projects. So in this example picture, we have 3 enormous boilers and a 2-story ladder here to give you an idea of what kind of large projects might be involved. Today we'll focus on smaller projects, but I just wanted to mention a little bit about this boiler savings program. The large boilers first, but really for anybody that has a boiler, there are boiler tune-up programs available. Boiler tune-up incentives. Once every 3 years, you can get a free boiler tune-up. Sometimes it's up to 75% of the cost, but right now I believe the program is covering 100% of the cost, up to $1,500. So every 3 years, you can get your boiler tuned up. If you have steam traps and an older steam type of system, you could have your steam traps assessed. Then there are additional controls for boilers, oxygen sensors, burner types of measures that are available through that program as well. So we have a flyer on our website if you're interested in more information on the public sector boiler gas incentive program. Just a quick example, these are from a school district, but they'd be applicable to park districts as well. For case studies of boiler tune-up programs, the Ball Chatham School District tuned up 23 boilers in their district in 6 schools in their district. And the tune-up cost for these 23 boilers was $45,000. At the time, the incentives were only covering 75% of that. Some of them are covering 100% now. but they save 10,000 therms throughout the year, and 10,000 therms every year. And so this simple payback saves us $7,000 a year. So it had less than a year payback in this case. So it's an excellent program to take advantage of. Related to the boiler program, there's also pipe installation programs. So the second example is a pipe installation program where they were replacing some of the failed pipe insulation in some places where the pipes were completely exposed, and there's a life safety question there as well. So sometimes people are able to apply some other funds, some life safety funds as well, to some of these projects to help pay for any remaining cost. But the pipe installation cost $5,000. They received almost $19,000 of incentives, and they're saving $3,000 a year. So this is a 2-year simple payback or so. These are excellent examples of what to do to save gas energy in buildings. Let's see. A little bit about some of the electric incentives. We have a 1-page PDF that has the front side is electric incentives overview and the back side is gas. Electric incentives for some of the measures that we're going to talk about today and some of the walkthrough equipment that we're going to look at today. So T12 to T8 lighting, retrofits from in the range of $7 per fixture, 7 to 27 depending on how many lamps per fixture. If you're talking about reduced wattage T8, there are incentives for just going from a regular T8 to a reduced wattage T8. If you're looking at doing new LED fixtures, down here with 60 cents per watt reduced. So in that case, you have to calculate what the wattage reduction is. And these are areas where our SEDAC reports and our SEDAC assessments can help you to identify this wattage reduction, to identify these potential incentives that you can get. Down at the bottom, for instance, the custom electric incentives, if there's something that doesn't fall, that's a little less typical, that doesn't fall on this menu of standard incentives, you can do a 12 cents per kilowatt hour saved incentive. And again, that's where a SEDAC report or a SEDAC assessment can be very helpful in helping calculate what those incentives are. We also have some other partners in the program, especially in the Chicago area. There's the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus that helps administer some of these incentives. And in the rural areas, downstate area, there are also our partners from the county board commissioners that can help. And sometimes they can even help with some of the incentive calculations and help with application assistance in these applications. Because the application itself, we've boiled it down to an overview here, but the application itself is an Excel form, and you have to be fairly detailed and fill out all the building information when you're filling out the fairly detailed application. So sometimes assistance can be helpful, we find. On the gas side here, there's incentives for furnaces, incentives for boilers, incentives for steam trap replacements. If you have kitchen equipment, ovens, cookers, typical things that might use gas in kitchens. Again, there's a custom incentive of $2.50 a therm, unless you're, again, really big users, in which case you might fall into the $3.50 or $4.50 per therm categories as well. One of our partner programs is so MIA, the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, helps administer the STEP program, Savings Through Efficient Products. Now, we encourage everybody to get SEDAC assistance and SEDAC assessments, but we also encourage people can apply for these STEP free products at the same time, and can have MIA come through and do a very simple walkthrough audit to identify if you have any potential for faucet aerators, shower heads, LED exit signs, and interior LEDs, and screw-in bulbs for LEDs or occupancy sensors. So these are things that people can install themselves. And thank you. So this is identifying equipment that people can install themselves, and they would come and do the audit, write down a list of items that you might be eligible for, and then send you those items, and then you just send back photos of the completed install. So it's really efficient, excellent way to get these really low-hanging fruit retrofits in your buildings. IllinoisStep.org is the website for more information about the application for this program. And it's a very simple application, very straightforward, and some of the same questions that you might have on the SEDAC application. Here's a sample project. This was a large park district that worked with the STEP program. So we have the number of aerators, 110 aerators, 190 CFL bulbs, lots of different exit signs of different types, and occupancy sensors in rooms, low flow shower heads, vending machine controls, and the total of the estimated savings is $35,000 per year. And so these can really add up, these low-hanging fruit items that are on 24/7 exit signs, for instance, can really help pay for themselves very quickly, and especially for free products. So I highly recommend everyone check out IllinoisSTEP.org and apply for a free energy assessment or a free STEP assessment through MIA. And you can do that in addition to the free energy assessment through SEDAC. Very briefly, I just wanted to share a graph that I find very hopeful and very inspiring. This shows the energy use, the total energy use in the United States for the last 50 years. And you can see the energy use, the top line, the yellow line has been going up, steadily going up. But in the last 15 years or so, we see a little bit of a dip from the recession in 2008, 2009. But we're just seeing very nice results of energy efficiency, I believe, in this graph. And this is both due to building energy efficiency codes, building energy codes taking effect, residential energy codes taking effect, car standards, car and truck standards for energy efficiency, for increased miles per gallon cars, and some industrial efficiencies as well. So this is a really hopeful graph, in my opinion, to see that total energy use leveling off while our economy still continues to thrive. For instance, we're not in a situation like we were in the late 70s or the 80s of energy insecurity. In fact, our total energy production has gone up quite a lot due to fracking for natural gas and oil. And in fact, our exports are going up. So the economy is doing well, and we're saving energy overall. So these are really good signs. Today, some of the equipment we'll talk about, some of the HVAC system overview, rooftop units, chillers and boilers. These are all different types of equipment you might see in your buildings. Lighting, motors, motor controllers, maybe old pneumatic control systems, maybe newer computerized control systems. So these are all things that we take a look for when we go into buildings and look for energy savings improvement opportunities. And again, this is sort of our top 10 list that kind of covers over those as well. So the top 10 items, and I generally rank these in order of sort of ease to implement, and sort of with a low-hanging fruit first, the easier things first. So lighting is always one of the first things that people look to save energy with lighting. Looking at plug loads, computers that are running. We need computers that have a screensaver. In the modern day, we don't have any need for screensavers. That's just wasting energy. Any heaters that are plugged in under people's desks. Sometimes I try not to be too critical of somebody that's cold and has a heater plugged into their desk, but I do recommend that what can be really a nice alternative is taking a 1,000-watt space heater and replacing it with a 50-watt heating pad, and you might put that on your desk or put one on the floor. You can get one for your feet, and then you have a contact heating source that can be much more efficient at keeping the occupant warm and not heating the air as much, but really keeping you nice and warm at your desk. So that's something to try that I always recommend. In the HVAC side of things, ventilation, reducing ventilation, turning it down, tuning it up, possible heat recovery in situations with 24/7 operation. We'll touch on heating and cooling, we'll touch on motors and pumps, building automation, and commissioning of systems, making sure things are operating correctly. Then down at the bottom, so I put building envelope down at the bottom, air sealing, insulation, and windows. Now these are the items that really hopefully are taking place when you first build a building. You're not going to be able to really change the wall insulation after the building is built. Not really going to be able to go and retrofit the windows very easily until quite a long way down the road. Older buildings, older schools, single pane windows, those kinds of situations, and there are life safety questions in some of those as well, where the windows are falling out. So you need to be replaced in some cases, but these are items that really, if you're not doing it as part of the original construction or major retrofit renovation, those are hard to change and very expensive. So we recommend doing the things that you can handle first and making plans for these larger projects. Similar to that, the extra credit is renewables like solar and wind are extra credit. After you've done everything that you can for efficiency, then you can look into putting solar on the roof. And here's a bus garage in Champaign or in Urbana with 300 kilowatts of solar on the roof. And that's about 10 or 20% of their overall electric use for the building. So that's, it's not all of the electric use for the building, but this is a pretty energy intensive facility with buses running through here all the time and charging air compressors for the buses. We've seen in recent years, we've seen people putting on, this is our old implementation coordinator, Holly Nelson, who's in Maryland now. And she had a project with her church to put solar on the roof of their church. And that was a pretty exciting project for her. One of the things that we're starting to see in the last 6 months or so with public sector clients is power purchase agreements for solar. And that's essentially like a leasing kind of situation where an investment company comes and owns the system and leases the system, and you would sign a power purchase agreement to purchase electricity from that system, from that company for a set number of years. And it's a way for that company to get the tax credits for those systems and potentially their solar renewable energy credits. So in some cases, we're seeing people are able to get 50% or 60% of the cost reduced from these systems, from some of these credits and some of these power purchase agreements, for instance. And sometimes power purchase agreements are zero down. We're really curious to see, just now we're just starting to see some examples of people looking at these power purchase agreements from some municipalities. And in the coming months, I'll be interested to see if those go forward. I think we'll start seeing more of those. They've been more common on the East Coast and West Coast where electricity is twice the price, and that's where these things generally pop up first. But, so that'll be an interesting thing to see in the future as we go forward. I realized I snuck a map from this came from our school talk, but in general, even for a park district, you might have a smaller building than this enormous high school, but we'd like to take a look at the aerial photograph of your building and take a look at maybe as we come in, we'll take a photograph of the emergency evacuation plan. It can be a helpful way for us to start understanding the site and start understanding how the building operates. We also take a look at one of the first steps in our audits is to look at energy bills and start comparing you to your peers within the energy bills. But let's go ahead and jump right into some example photos from Park District Sports Center. And so this beautiful new building has this glass facing south, which can be a pretty big heat load. So it's very nice, very attractive. And it's probably a good thing the entire building isn't built with glass facing south because it would overheat the occupants, but it certainly does make a nice entrance. So there's a 90,000 square foot sports center, and they have about $250,000 per year energy bill. So as we walk into the building, we walk into the vestibule, and one of the first things we might notice is taking a look under the doors is to see if there's a good air seal or not. So if we see light shining under a door, that's a pretty good indication that the weather stripping is missing or damaged. And you can see a little bit of it out in the exterior door as well. So the exterior door is really where you want to focus on, but this illustrates the problem as well. And those vestibules are designed for a reason, and we don't really need to have those vestibules be as warm as the building. They're really just a space to kind of temper the air as you come in, to keep, if there's someone at a front desk, maybe we don't want to have cold air blasting at them all the time. So it's nice to have it far enough apart that the doors are staggered. But in some cases, I've had some desks where they didn't have them far enough apart, and they did put an air curtain. It's a little bit difficult to quantify exactly the effects, the energy effects of the air curtain, but for comfort, that can be another useful thing. But see this electric heater down here is what's keeping the space tempered and warm. And it really doesn't have to be running all the time. I mean, this is a difficult item to know how much does that electric heater run and what's the set point. It's usually locked or screwed down. You can't even really adjust it very easily. But just keeping in mind that this can be turned down to, experiment with turning it down to a minimal temperature. You don't want it to freeze out here if you have some sprinklers, but maybe even cool this down a lot and then put heat tape on the sprinklers. That would be a more energy efficient application, kind of like putting a contact heater on your desk instead of heating the space with this expensive electric heat. So that's just another thing to watch out for. Sometimes vestibule space heaters could account for a pretty sizable portion of electric use in the winter, and it's not always noticeable because they're just kind of hidden and forgotten about. All right, as we walk through these spaces, might come to a exercise classroom, and this is a good example of the lights were off when we came in, and they had good lighting controls. I think they had a switch for fans, or maybe this was the audio, some other aspects of the room, and then the lights were mostly controlled from this occupancy sensor. And there's a little bit of a distinction between occupancy and vacancy in sensors. We like to make that distinction when we talk to classrooms, or in this case, if this was a yoga studio, if it was auto on when you walked in, and they all should be auto off. But the point is to save energy by being auto off. But the question is it auto on or manual on? And you probably, if you live in Star Trek world, you might want to have automatic lights every time you walk into a room, and that feels pretty cool. But for an energy purpose, do we really need the lights popping on every time you stick your head in a room, or you reach in to the custodial person reaches in to get the trash in the afternoon? Or if you're having a yoga class, you want the lights off for a reason. You don't want them popping back on. So you want to have a long enough delay that these lights don't turn off unnecessarily, but something 15 or 20 minutes. You want to make sure these lights aren't on all night long. But this question of whether you want auto on or manual on is an interesting question. Most sensors you can toggle the setting for whether it's auto on or manual on. These are also great for racquetball courts. So having an occupancy sensor in a racquetball court where the lights would otherwise just be on during the entire day of operation, and you might only have racquetball for a few hours of that. One of the big hurdles there was a lot of racquetball courts were metal halide, really bright metal halide lights, and those took a long time to turn back on once you turn them off. Now that we're seeing more interior LED lighting, that's a good application, even though they're a little bit more costly. But putting LED in racquetball courts, they can be turned on and off instantaneously, so that's a good application there as well. Daytime lighting. So it's hard to see in this picture, but these uplights are on, and they're right underneath these windows. So there's a little bit of a design question, why were they put there to begin with? But they're lighting the ceiling and providing ambient light. These are metal halide lights. I believe these were metal halide lights, these hanging pendants as well. And both of these probably would be good applications, especially the uplights would be good applications for LED lighting, and retrofitting these and having the ability to turn them off then when they're not in use. So either turning them off with a daylight sensor, or with the occupancy sensor as a possibility, or just turning them on a simple time clock. And sometimes simpler is better in that regard. Sometimes the complicated computerized lighting controls are the first things that go by the wayside in a building. And a simple time clock can be a nice, elegant solution to keeping these lights from being on 24/7. As we walk through the building, we might notice and take a picture of the double pane windows. And there's pane on the inside and the pane on the outside, separated by this thermally broken spacer. The other question is having to do with the frames and making sure the frames are thermally broken. And you might notice, so here's this rubber spacer here, and hopefully that continues throughout the whole frame. On a cold day, you would, if your frame is not thermally broken, you would see condensation happening here on the metal frame. And on a cold enough day, you'd start seeing it frost up and turn into ice. So that's an indication that your your window panes are really bleeding a lot of heat to the outside frames. All right, HVAC set point in spaces and work, especially in workout rooms. Really, it's good to try to have comfort expectations for the facility and ask questions like, are the comfort expectations different in a gym than they are in an office or than they are in your home where you're pretty sedentary? So, you know, a question would be, in this case, why was the thermostat set to 67 degrees? Is that reasonable? Weightlifters are in here sweating and working out, and you know, you want to make sure everybody's comfortable, but 67 seems awfully chilly, and people are wearing sweatpants anyways and sweatshirts, so it's a good idea to ask why not have it at a more reasonable set point of in the summer of 72 or 76, something a little higher. You want to take the humidity out of the room. You still want to air condition in the summer, but raising that set point would make sense, or at least exploring that. Pools are a big energy user in Park District facilities, and recommendations generally for pools are variable frequency drives on the motors, which we'll touch on briefly. Looking at the air and water temperatures, making sure those are within a couple degrees to not be bleeding a lot of heat into the air. Looking at night water setback. Pool covers are an excellent item to reduce energy use in pools. Sometimes they just roll up on the side, and they can seem like a hurdle for maintenance or for just daily application of putting it off and on. But when you start to see the numbers of how much energy savings is potentially there, they really quickly look like a good idea, a good investment. High efficiency boilers for the pool water, and dehumidifying the air, and looking at energy recovery from the dehumidification side of it. Here's some interesting data that we collected from a pool that was able to do some experiments with changing their set point temperature and also setting it back at night. So in this case, so the pool water and air temperature differential is what drives the energy loss, mostly through evaporation in pools. And not only then are you evaporating the water into the air, but you're having to pay to condition the air to get that evaporation out and keep your humidity levels from being too high and eroding your building. So in this case, they looked at changing from a pool set point of 88 to 85.5. This was a pretty warm pool, but it didn't really need to be therapeutic per se. So they were able to do some trial and error and change this pool water set point. And 85.5 is still a very warm pool. It's but this gets it a lot closer to the air temperature of about 80-degree air temperature. That's a reasonable air temperature, and 2 to 4 degrees is really kind of an ideal temperature in a sort of a typical pool to have the air versus water temperature between 2 to 4 degrees set difference. Also in this graph, we were able to do some tests where we were setting the pool back. They were closing at 10 and then opening at 11. And on the days that was applicable, they were able to set up a schedule where their boiler changes the water temperature overnight, and it sets it back. And it was able to lose about 2 degrees. It was able to, by just coasting, it lost about 2 degrees, and then it was able to make that up within 2 hours in the morning. So it's nice to see that what the capabilities of the boilers are to really do a test. I think they did this over spring break. They weren't in, or a period of time when they weren't in session, and we're able to see what the energy savings could be. We were able to help calculate the energy savings for custom incentive in this case. For pool filters and pumps, so in this case we have 2 15 horsepower pumps and 2 15 horsepower motors, and they're running 24/7. So really just a lot of energy use going in to the circulation pumps. They're going through horizontal sand filters. Now in this picture you see this giant crank and this butterfly valve, and it's labeled here, and there's a little Sharpie marker here, and it's labeled 30% or 40% open. So in this case, this pool is restricting the flow of their pool waters, their recirculation water. But a better way to do that would be with a variable frequency drive. So a variable frequency drive would be a drive, sometimes it's called a variable speed drive. and it reduces the energy, the frequency of the power going to the motor, and reduces the energy by a square. So it really is an enormous energy reduction by reducing the speed of the motor, and it can still fall within the design parameters of the pool pump and the gallons per minute of the system. Pool boilers, looking at what pool boilers are existing. So in this case, this was rated at 81% efficiency. It's pretty old, so it's possible that it's lost some of its efficiency as well. But this could be upgraded to a condensing boiler at 94 to 98% efficient. And you can find the efficiency of your boiler by looking at the input and the output, and dividing the two to find out what the efficiency of the boiler is. And that means in this case that almost 20% of the heat is just going up the flue stack and being wasted. Similarly, here's in the same mechanical room, we had a hot water space heating boiler. This was rated at 78% efficient, and mentioned some of the incentives earlier that are available to upgrade. So the incentives are there to help the cost to upgrade to a condensing unit compared to if you upgraded to a standard efficiency code minimum unit. So it's not, the incentives aren't paying for the whole cost of your upgrade. The idea is that there's this incremental push to get you more efficient than you would have been by just doing the bare code minimum. Here's an example of a small boiler retrofit. So there's a 20,000 square foot building, and there's this old 1940s boiler. In fact, down here it was factory retrofit from coal to natural gas. So that tells you something about the vintage of this boiler, that it came with the option to have coal and natural gas. Cutting this old boiler out, it's a pretty awesome picture of getting the boiler out of the space. This didn't cost anything because the contractor was happy to go and sell this for scrap metal. So even though it did take some work to cut it up and get it out. But see, this is replaced by this unit that's smaller than my refrigerator, and has saved a lot of space in this boiler room. In fact, we were able to take the exhaust was going out the back here, and it's been turned into a window. So now they have a very nice new mechanical room. They painted the walls white and feel like they got a whole new room out of the deal as well. And here are the gas bills from our analysis, and you can see the monthly gas bars here, and then the black is the savings that they had compared to the heating degree days that was matched to the previous years. So they're saving about $2,000 a year by the retrofit of this boiler. So it's an excellent example. Another photograph of some condensing boilers of a different type. And notice again, they have PVC flue stacks, and that's so they don't corrode due to the condensate, the acidic condensate. A good point to make is that they all condensing boilers require commissioning and making sure that the boiler set point temperature is varying based on the outdoor air temperature, and to make sure that you have the most hours at condensing conditions. There'll be some hours of the year where they're having to produce very hot water to heat the building, and there'll be some of those hours where they're not even operating condensing mode, they're operating in more of a standard boiler mode to produce 180 degree water, for instance. But for all the mild days of the year that they can produce 110 degree water or 100 degree water, then we're really getting down into the condensing, the peak efficiency of those boilers. So making sure that that set point, that water set point is set up and stays in place over time is really crucial to make sure that that you're getting a full investment on these boilers. Similar story in furnaces. So here are two natural gas furnaces side by side. They can be in the range of 93 to 98% efficient. This one said it was 95%. Annual fuel use efficiency, which is sort of the average over the year efficiency. And notice this is the intake pipe. Here's the exhaust exit here, flue stack. But the intake pipe, this would be better if it was piped to the outside, and if they had intake air, dedicated intake air from the outside. in this case, it's using some of this mechanical room air that's conditioned air, and it's wasting some of that into the going up the flue stack. So that's maybe a 1 or 2% efficiency hit that they're taking in this case, just due to some missed opportunity of adding some PVC pipe. We mentioned unit heaters and vestibules. They can also be in mechanical spaces, sometimes in exterior or exterior wall situations where there might be some storage, and those can be cold rooms. And the question is, maybe they should be cold rooms as long as they're not getting below freezing. So really experimenting and setting the set point on these to be as minimal as possible in those spaces can help save a lot of electric energy. Electric heat is a very expensive way to heat a building. Now we're getting up to the roof in our building here. So this has a large pool dehumidification unit, and things to watch out for as the units get older are watch out for leaking hot water valves, watch out for any of these, all the gases, the refrigeration gases in these units can be pretty complicated and pretty advanced to do hot gas recovery, to do some energy recovery from all the conditioning that's happening, and maybe send that back to the pool water to lessen the load on the pool heater. But those bypass valves can fail, especially if it's in a corrosive environment with pool chemistry, and really watching out for the maintenance of these units. And they're running 24/7 usually. So the question could be, could they turn off some period at night, running some experiments with that, and making sure the building conditions stay optimal during those times? Or if they're running 24/7, just recognize that these pieces of equipment are going to fail sooner than they're just going to have more running hours of operation than the rest of the building equipment. Since we talked a little bit about ventilation, I just want to remind everyone about how ventilation gets into the building. We don't tend to have to open up the window and let fresh air in. It's all hidden away in mechanical systems. So really you have no idea how many windows are open in your building right now. But fresh air is a good thing. We want to make sure that we have clean, fresh air in our buildings. We want to find out, is your fresh air, ventilation air coming in centrally, or is it in each room? For instance, a classroom might have unit ventilators. So here's an example of an outside wall, and the outdoor air comes in through a louver and mixes with some room air. It's heated in the coil and then blown into the room. So making sure that this damper is working correctly, that it's connected correctly. Sometimes they're just manually set, and maybe taking a handheld CO2 meter and checking these rooms during high occupancy periods. You can get data logging CO2 meters that are not too expensive. In new construction or in major retrofits, you can retrofit these into the HVAC system so that it dynamically controls the outdoor air in the spaces based on the space CO2 set points. Outdoor CO2 set point is outdoor CO2 levels are about 400 parts per million, and generally indoor air levels should be lower than 1100 parts per million average throughout the day. So if you have a little spike, that's fine. You're not going to die. OSHA requirements are that it's under 50,000 parts per million. I don't think you feel drowsiness until about 20,000 parts per million. So this 1100, you're not going to die if you hit that. It's but you want to look at what the average exposure is throughout the day to make sure that people, it mostly has to do with making sure that you have fresh air in your building, and that you're not smelling your neighbors, and that you're not transmitting germs in the air too much. So fresh air is a good thing, but making sure that the fresh air is closing at night and that it's not giving too much fresh air is the other thing that's really important in buildings for energy use. Let's see, on the rooftop units, so there are rooftop units, sometimes heating and cooling in one unit. It's worth noting that since we talked about earlier that the condensing furnace has has condensate water that drips out of it, so some corrosive condensate water. You can't really put that outside in our climate, because if that condensate water were freezing as it was dripping out, then you'd have a serious problem in the middle of the winter when your furnace shuts down due to a frozen condensate line. So you only pretty much ever see 80% efficient rooftop unit heaters in our climate area. And so looking at designing ways for those to be in interior spaces can allow those to be condensing. Maybe in the future we'll have more common ways to deal with that condensate to allow for condensing units on rooftops, but right now it really does limit them at about 80% efficient. But there are programs to do tune-ups on large rooftop units or medium-sized or even small rooftop units. So looking at the fans and the belts and making sure that they're clean and that they're properly tuned up. So there are programs for that as well. In the building automation system, so this example was an antiquated building automation system on a computer, and computers can quickly become obsolete, so keeping on top of that's important. And this facility, because of this, it was really almost abandoned and not being maintained. The programming, this facility was heating and cooling 24/7 without temperature setback, without any changes in the ventilation in the system. So it needs a control system upgrade, and that's going to help them a lot in this large building. And that's a bulk of their energy savings in this case came from turning the fans off, turning the heating down at night. Here's an example, a case study on the other end of the spectrum for a small building, a smaller medium-sized building. Now this is a public library, it's a normal public library, and they replaced a large multi-zone heating and cooling unit with a bank of furnaces and air conditioning units that are more residential in style, and they even got to use the fairly simple residential smartphone application to help control these. So instead of having a legacy computer that is difficult to control, out of date, it's going to be pretty expensive to upgrade. This is a pretty simple and nice scenario where they're just able to scroll on the phone and see all the different 10 zones, 8 or 10 zones in this facility. It cost money to install this many furnaces and to get this all installed, but they're saving, in this case, $38,000 a year. So this has a relatively quick payback as far as HVAC systems go. Because you have to imagine these HVAC systems are going to last 20 or 30 years. So the payback is usually not immediate, usually maybe more in the sort of the 16-year range, but it all depends on how bad your system was to begin with. Briefly just talk about lighting at the end here. So gym lighting is pretty common to go to T5 or T8 retrofits. We're starting to see more LED retrofits as those come down in cost. And being a high, tall space, LEDs seem to work pretty well for those interior spaces. The LEDs also have an advantage of they're more durable to ball impacts. Both fluorescent and LED are able to be turned on and off instantly. You don't have to wait for restrike like metal halide. So you can put occupancy sensors on these. You can put for events and for presentations, you can turn the lights off and turn them right back on. So there's some comfort and some usability aspects as well. So the thing of LED, the question always comes up, new LED fixture versus T8 retrofit LEDs. Just recently, the costs have started coming down on these linear tube LED replacements. They were $90 a couple years ago. Maybe they're $20 last year. We're starting to see them in the $10 or $7 range. So that's good. The costs are coming down, but that's one hurdle with that technology. The other tricky thing is that the savings isn't as we get better and better lighting systems, that savings is incrementally less and less. So going from a 32-watt T8 or even a 28-watt reduced wattage T8, then you're going down to a 17-watt LED. It's great, but that it just factors into how much you had to pay for it to begin with as that cost gets eroded. Reliability was a big question in the last few years. Were they name brand manufacturers? Were they being sold off the back of a truck? What's the lifespan like? What's the warranty like? So those were big questions, and those were causing difficulties in the industry as well. And then there's the question of, do you remove the old ballast in a retrofit, or do you use do you tie it to line? Do you remove the ballast and have it getting line voltage, or do you keep the ballast and use a type that can be driven by the old ballast or the line voltage? Another question is, there's a safety aspect to if you remove the ballast and this lamp is getting line voltage. What happens if a new janitor comes in, or someone who didn't know better puts an old fluorescent lamp in? Is there potential for explosion, for fire? So there still are some questions as far as the retrofits go. So that's why most of the incentive programs favor looking at new LED fixtures completely, and going ahead and getting rid of the old yellow plastic that was in the old fixture, going ahead and doing the upgrade, and going to a new LED fixture. Exterior, we're seeing a lot of exterior LED lighting. Here's a nice example of some parking lots that have gone to new LED lights that have a nice beam spread and a nice color compared to the old yellow sodium lights. And this can have safety aspects as well. The video recording will work better. You can see the color of the car. You can see maybe license plates better. Furthermore, you can do innovative things. You can have these on occupancy sensors, and you can have the farthest areas of the parking lot turn off at night, and schedule them more directly. Or they can be on occupancy sensors, and if somebody drives through, then the lights come on, and it's really obvious that the lights are on and that someone's there. So those are also really good examples. And so parking lot LED lighting is very typical. We're seeing 50% savings typically. Exterior building LED retrofits, we're seeing enormous savings on those as well. Pathway lighting. Where we haven't seen so much yet is in maybe the 700 or 1000 watt metal halide retrofits. Those are still, it's difficult to get an LED that doesn't get too hot in those situations, and heat is what killed LEDs. So that's big. Outdoor lighting is still sort of a question mark, and maybe we'll see that as time goes on, we'll start seeing more viable options for those high wattage examples. A couple case studies here to wrap up. We have a new construction recreation center. Now this recreation center is an example of a project that came in early enough that we were able to work on a design phase. So some of the architects on staff worked with the architecture firm that was working on this to brainstorm ideas, to look at getting beyond code from the early stages when you can really have the most effect. This project was a few years ago, but it was looking at being at 50% beyond the 2007 code. That was calculating out to be $64,000 of incentives. They were looking at doing demand control ventilation throughout the facility, more efficient mechanical systems, high performance glazing, air sealing, making sure to do air sealing and checking the air sealing carefully during construction, further reductions to lighting power density, and we recommended strategies for building automation system for full building commissioning, making sure things are working correctly, and bi-level switching and stairs so that the stairway lights are not always on at full power. And then when it was built, they ended up doing increased roof and wall R values. They did structural insulated panels for the structure of this building that has sandwiched insulation built in. They were able to reduce the lighting power density by 0.3 watts per square foot. So for example, lighting might be 1 watt per square foot, and they're getting down to the 0.7 watts per square foot range. So really excellent reduction there. And they used ground source heat pumps, so geothermal heating and cooling in this building. They had plenty of fields to tap into to bury the pipes of that system. And so as far as incentives that they ended up getting, we estimate they had $10,000 a year in energy savings, and that they were able to get total incentives of $70,000 and a simple payback of 5 years for going beyond code in this case. So we have a new construction program. You can chat with our architects on staff if you have questions about new construction. And there are also some incentives that are available through these programs. Just really briefly, let's just touch on a couple more case studies. Here's an ice rink, and they put a low E ceiling in, so that's that reflective ceiling that you see nowadays that helps reflect the heat back down. And ice temperature control with setbacks overnight. They were looking at reducing the ice thickness, floating head pressure controls, heat pump water heating for the Zamboni, for the hot water for the Zamboni, replacing metal halide with fluorescent, occupancy sensors for lighting, and vending power management. So this was annual energy savings of $12,000, total project cost $45,000, so 3 or 4 year payback in this case. Case study of the Decatur Civic Center. Now I use this one, you'll notice that this example project had a $0 cost. That's because it had the fortune of being shovel ready in 2009 when the ERA money came through, when the block grants came through from the Reinvestment Act. And this is an example of, even if you don't have money now, getting the report, having it on the shelf, doing some of the low-hanging fruit that you can, getting any of the incentives that you can now are great. But they had some big projects for the chiller, for sequencing the equipment, for boiler pump controls. And so this $300,000, a lot of lighting upgrades, $300,000 project was shovel ready, ready to go. And we're estimating it's going to save $60,000 a year by doing this. So getting these assessments early is a great idea. And we love to work with people that have funds and are ready to go on making change in projects. But we also like to work with people that are planning for the future. We have lots of publications on the SEDAC website. You can look for this presentation that's been recorded to be there, and also lots of case studies and presentations and examples on our website under documentation. Just a brief overview reminder that we have the Illinois Energy Now standard and custom incentives for lighting, boilers, HVAC tune-up, variable speed drives, and any other custom measures that you can that we can come up with and help make incentives for, make calculations for. We mentioned some of our partner programs. There's some application assistance through our program that we can help you with these applications. There's the STEP program for free products right away, natural gas savings programs. We have a group of trade allies of contractors that are in the trade ally program that know about all these incentives, that know how to apply for these incentives. So you might find that the contractors that you're already using are part of the trade ally program and have been trained on these incentives as well. So in summary, and if there are any questions as we're wrapping up here, feel free to ask questions in the chat box. But as far as a summary, SEDAC is here to help identify cost-effective energy efficiency solutions for buildings throughout Illinois, for public sector buildings. We're a first stop for all the Illinois Energy Now questions. And we have trade ally partners to help make change throughout the state. We have examples on our websites of owners and projects that have used these programs, and you can get your buildings involved. You can get your park districts involved in energy assessments, retro commissioning for bigger projects, new construction, design assistance, or incentives. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'll stick on the line for a few minutes to answer any questions. I think we have some questions come in, and we can work to answer some of these. I have a question from, we will be building a 12,000 square foot center this year. Who should I contact to make sure we're taking advantage of everything? You can contact our program and contact the SEDAC office, the Illinois Energy Now office, the toll-free number, and just put up in the contact notes 800-214-7954. So you can call and we can answer specific questions about buildings. I will say that sometimes there are size requirements for all the programs. So if you fall within different size ranges, we can tailor the assistance to help everyone. But we want to try to be able to help people with energy efficiency and going beyond code and looking for any possible incentives that are available. And we can wait just a couple more minutes and see if there are any other questions.
And posted the hotline here for the panelists.
Let's see, yeah, and put up the 800 number.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks, Ann. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here today. And oh, there's a question in Q&A. Let's see. Okay, there's a question in the Q&A. We are replacing a PVI boiler with 2 smaller boilers. How do we determine what we qualify for? Certainly you could start by a phone call to our offices. You can start by or you could do the 1-page application, and get our full services for energy assessments. But generally, we can start with finding out what the size of your systems are and where you're located in the state, and find out what, make sure, double check that you're available for the incentives, and they might be able to answer your questions that way for specific details. But generally, the boiler incentives that we talked about earlier would be applicable to pretty much all situations. So there's based on the size of the boiler, and making sure that you're going to a condensing boiler beyond code, those would be the requirements in the application. Okay, well, we're going to post the recording on the website here later on, and I thank everybody for joining us again. Thank you very much, and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.